Good morning, welcome to Headline Focus here live on Core Politics with me, Rob Double. It is Friday, the 8th of June 2018. Let's have a look at what's making the political news today. And to start off with, Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary, has done a bit of a blunder. The audio tapes released last night of him at a meeting for a Conservative Way Forward dinner on Wednesday, released first by BuzzFeed News, broken by BuzzFeed News, reveal that he is not that happy with what's going on in Brexit and provides further news lines against the government and indeed against Prime Minister Theresa May. Now, let's see what he actually said. So this is going to be making a lot of the news today and certainly a lot of the reports and a lot of the political agenda. So on Donald Trump, the US president, in terms of the Brexit negotiations, he said Donald Trump would go in hard and Trump would certainly get somewhere with the Brexit negotiations as a result. Now, this was clearly more of a joke side of the speech he was making at the time, so very clear, something that you should see as just a bit of a laugh, certainly in the context of what comes next, because what he further says is of the Treasury, led by, of course, Chancellor Philip Hammond. He said it's being the heart of Remain, and effectively saying it's undermining the government's position, or rather the government's efforts to try and ensure a good Brexit by being so Remain-centric and unable to really get behind the government's agenda for Brexit. And of Brexit itself, that was where actually the most interesting stuff came from. It was the country had to face the fact that there may now be a meltdown. It's going to be all right in the end. Going on further, he says Brexit will be irreversible and there's a risk that we will not be the one. It will not be the one that we want. Now that's surprising. It's the first time Boris Johnson's aired, and he's Foreign Secretary. Remember, this is a senior government figure, one of the big three government figures, or big four really government figures, making these very public statements against, or rather undermining, the confidence in the Prime Minister and indeed the position the government's taking in terms of Brexit. Real significant stuff. Obviously, he didn't realise this was being recorded when he made this speech. He thought he was in a room with friends, but clearly someone else had other ideas. On the Irish border as well, he said the fears about the Irish border is pure millennium bug stuff, saying it's just beyond belief that we're allowing the tail to wag the dog in this way. We're allowing the whole of our agenda to be dictated by this folly, referring specifically there to the Irish border and the problems, or rather the key crux it's become in terms of agreeing to a future relationship with the EU and indeed agreeing to much of the UK-EU relationship post-Brexit. Now, he did note, in terms of Theresa May, the Prime Minister did actually say something specific, saying it's going to go into a phase where we are much more combative with Brussels. So something perhaps he's aware of some information that, of course, the public are not, but also perhaps then him wanting to put more pressure on Theresa May to perhaps be more combative and indeed be a little bit harder with Brussels. So he sees it, we get the deal that he wants, or rather he thinks Brexiters are looking for. Really significant stuff in terms of his prominence within the government, his prominence within the Conservative Party, his prominence as a potential leader in waiting, but also this is going to be something Downing Street are not going to be happy to have to deal with today, certainly while the G7 is underway. We'll get onto that in just a sec. Next up, though, there was another cabinet member who was going through a bit of a showdown with Theresa May yesterday. This was resolved last night. That was, of course, David Davis, the Brexit Secretary. He was on the verge of resigning on Wednesday and indeed Thursday morning. There were two crunch meetings with the Prime Minister where it was all resolved. Now, this comes down to the UK backstop solution. Now, this is what happens in the case of no deal being done between the UK or the EU. Nothing can be agreed. Technology is not ready on time, and it's fundamentally about avoiding a hard border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. Now, this proposal is different to the EU's one, which was suggesting Northern Ireland stay part of the customs union of the EU and the UK mainland do their own thing, effectively creating that border in the Irish Sea, which the Prime Minister said she will never agree to. This UK proposal, effectively amending the EU's backstop proposal, is to allow the whole of the UK mainland, including Northern Ireland, to stay in the customs union. So that would be, the border would then be, to some extent, non-existent because everyone would still be part of the customs union. There would be no need to have barriers in terms of imports and exports. The key thing here is the UK would match EU tariffs, so therefore you'd have that no border, but it would be for a limited set of circumstances, according to the Prime Minister, those which are necessary. Why David Davis and the Prime Minister started to disagree was over the time limit or the time period which this backstop would be enforceable for. Now, in the initial proposals which were released, there was no time limit on when this backstop would end. It was effectively going on until there was another solution. The fear is there from many Brexiters, and certainly from David Davis, was that it would give Brussels no incentive to really resolve the backstop issue and resolve the issue so to get away from the backstop. But it would also mean that by proxy or by de facto, Brexit would become simply what the backstop is, aka still inside the customs union, which is what many people, including David Davis, Boris Johnson, some of the Brexiteer cabinet members, are looking to absolutely avoid, because in the customs union you cannot pursue your own independent trade policy, of course. Now this, apparently according to this meetings, David Davis got a victory of sorts. He managed to get in a certain time limit. That was an expected end date of 2021, and therefore the customs arrangement is temporary until that period. However, when you look at what's actually being said there, it's a temporary customs arrangement, yes, but it's an expected end date of 2021. That is by no means enforceable. That is by no means clear in terms of here is a set date by which the backstop deal is finished and we need to move on to the next permanent solution to Brexit. There is an expectation from the government, but that is it. So in terms of the woolliness of this language, David Davis, the Brexit Secretary, arguably hasn't got much of a concession, because really the government has no leverage to force the government or really tie the government's hands to any specific date at all. There is simply an expectation, and expectations of course can change depending on the months which go by and the Brexit negotiations that happen and the political circumstances surrounding government as well. So a lot of people are saying, to some extent, that this was not really a victory for David Davis. This was more a fudge by the government, for which David Davis will inevitably have to get angry again next time, and possibly next time go over the ledge into actually resigning, which will cause, of course, in terms of the government, an absolute political disarray over Theresa May's leadership. Michel Barnier, I should say today, is going to be responding, giving his first public response to Britain's new backstop plan for Brexit. So have a look at that. That will no doubt be hitting the UK news feeds a little bit later on. Finally, one more story is Theresa May is snubbed by US President Donald Trump. And this is regarding the G7 meeting, which is taking place today in Canada, in Quebec. He's agreed to hold formal bilateral talks with both President Macron of France and Justin Trudeau, President Trudeau, of Canada. No such privilege has been afforded to Theresa May. So there is no formal bilateral talk with the Prime Minister and the President of the United States. A clear snub, or rather a clear indication of Donald Trump's priorities. And that's certainly how it's been reported today in the UK papers. Less formal meeting is still on the cards for Theresa May. That's been reported as well. However, the fact of there's lack of formality to it, there's lack of an event to it, will definitely be seen as something where, you know, Macron gets Preston over Theresa May in terms of the meetings and getting in front of the US President to talk politics. Now, the G7 itself is going to be in a bit of a hostile environment. There'll be some interesting lines, no doubt, coming from this, mainly stemming from the US President's decision to slap tariffs on the European, Canadian and Mexican goods. And that will be something which already is causing some lines, particularly between Emmanuel Macron, Justin Trudeau and Donald Trump. So no doubt expect more on that today. But certainly in terms of the US and the UK, we don't know exactly what the meeting's going to take place, what's going to happen, but potentially some more lines on that to look out for as well. That's pretty much it for today, and indeed this week. You're up to date. Don't forget you can find all the latest on what we're doing here on Core Politics on our Facebook page and Twitter right there. But from me and all the team here at Core London, have a fantastic weekend ahead. See you on Monday.